Many people assume that the fall of Bashar al-Assad in December 2024 marked the beginning of a clean rebirth for Syria. The Caesar Act has been repealed. The central bank just reactivated its Federal Reserve account for the first time since 2011. The EU is restoring full diplomatic relations on May 11th. And Iraq is exploring routing its crude exports through the Baniyas terminal. But behind those headlines, more than 3,000 people have been killed in sectarian massacres, a cross-border attack was foiled on April 19th, and a powerful neighbor has built at least 9 military bases inside Syrian territory while approving a $334 million plan to expand its settlements. And so today, we look at where Syria currently stands, the rebirth that nobody expected, the fragility nobody is pricing in, and the territorial pressure that the recovery narrative is unwilling to discuss. My name is Nick, and this is Coin Bureau Finance. Now, to understand the magnitude of what is happening on the ground today, we first have to start with a financial reset. After 14 years of civil war and decades of sanctions, the new Syrian government under President Ahmed al-Sharaa has spent the past 16 months systematically re-entering the international financial system. The Caesar Act, the most punitive layer of the US sanctions architecture, has been formally repealed. Most Western sanctions have been lifted, and Syria's central bank reactivated its Federal Reserve account for the first time in 14 years, restoring access to the dollar clearing infrastructure that any serious capital inflow requires. On May 11th, the European Union is set to restore full diplomatic relations with Damascus, completing what is effectively the fastest international rehabilitation of a post-conflict government in modern memory. And there are good reasons for moving so quickly. Reconstruction estimates for Syria run into the hundreds of billions of dollars, and Gulf capital, particularly from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar, has been waiting on a clean legal pathway to deploy. With the sanctions swept aside, that pathway now exists. But there's more to this story than rebuilding a country devastated by war. There's a strategic element at play here too. Iraq is actively exploring routing its crude oil exports through Syria's Baniyas terminal on the Mediterranean coast, bypassing the Strait of Hormuz entirely. As you'll doubtless know by now, roughly 20% of global oil flows usually transit through Hormuz, and the disruptions of the past few months have made that choke point a permanent risk premium on every barrel that moves through it. And if there's a way to move that oil out of the Gulf without passing under the noses of the Iranian regime, then you can be sure a lot of people are going to be interested in making that happen. So, if Iraq can successfully reroute a meaningful share of its exports through Baniyas, Syria stops being just a reconstruction story and becomes a regional energy transit hub with revenue from transit fees, port operations, refinery throughput, and the entire services ecosystem that builds up around major energy corridors. Put simply, this is the kind of asset that countries fight wars to control and could be a key component of Syria's recovery and future prosperity. And on April 16th and 17th, the United States completed its full military withdrawal from Syria, handing over the last installation, which is Khazrak Air Base in Hasaka, to the Syrian Arab Army. CENTCOM described the handover as deliberate and condition-based. The Syrian Foreign Ministry, meanwhile, called the country fully capable of maintaining its own security. After 12 years of US military presence that began as the anti-ISIS campaign in 2014, the era of American boots on Syrian ground is over. And this brings us directly to the question that every institutional desk evaluating the thesis for investing in Syria's reconstruction is being forced to answer. Can the new Syria actually hold together long enough to capitalize on the opportunity in front of it? Because the data on internal cohesion is not so encouraging. In March of last year, what began as an ambush of transitional government forces by Assad loyalists on the coast spiraled into a systematic violence against Alawite communities across the Latakia, Tartus, Homs, and Hama. UN investigators documented between 1,400 and 1,700 civilians killed. The UN Commission of Inquiry implicated elements operating under the Ministry of Defense, specifically Unit 400 and the General Security Service. A national fact-finding committee identified 298 suspects, but human rights groups have criticized the resulting trials in Aleppo as failing to address command responsibility. Then, in July, the violence migrated south. Over a 5-day window, UN investigators documented at least 1,707 people killed in Suwadia, with the Syrian government's own National Investigative Committee subsequently raising that figure to 1,760, alongside nearly 200,000 displaced and roughly 36 villages destroyed. The UN Commission concluded that Syrian government forces collaborated with tribal fighters to carry out widespread extrajudicial executions. As of right now, only 23 security and army personnel had been detained in connection with what happened. A UN Commission chair called the scale and brutality deeply distressing, and the Christian community has not been spared. A suicide bombing of the Mar Elias church in Damascus last June killed 25 and injured 70. Sectarian violence damaged homes and churches in the predominantly Christian town of al-Suqalabiyya in March. And on April 11th, Syrian security forces arrested a Hezbollah-linked cell that had been planning to target a religious figure near a Maronite church in Damascus's Bab Tuma district. Just over a week later, on April 19th, the Interior Ministry announced it had foiled a separate Hezbollah-linked sabotage plot, where a civilian lorry had been disguised to conceal missiles and rocket launching equipment. 2 suspects were arrested and a third remains at large, and Hezbollah categorically denied any presence in Syria, calling the accusations false and fabricated. Now, the broader external picture has been just as turbulent. Iran has been effectively expelled, the IRGC-linked militias have been dismantled, the supply tunnels to Hezbollah closed, and the entire axis of resistance corridor through Syrian territory is now severed. Russia retains its naval facility at Tartus and the Himyman Air Base under renegotiated terms, with President al-Sharaa flying to Moscow twice in the past 6 months to lock in those agreements. But the dominant external patron is now Turkey. Turkish banks have moved into Syria, Turkish military advisors are training the new Syrian army, and Ankara is openly pushing a Middle East trade corridor concept that would connect Europe to the Gulf through Syrian territory. Now, navigating these enormous geopolitical and financial crosscurrents and understanding how they actually transmit into commodity markets, currencies, and your portfolio requires constant vigilance and objective analysis. So, if you want to stay informed, you should be reading the Coin Bureau Finance newsletter. It's absolutely free, and we break down everything regarding global finance, energy markets, macroeconomic trends, and monetary policy so you never miss what truly matters. Just click the link in the description or scan this QR code right on your screen. And now, back to the third act of the Syrian story, the one that the Rebirth narrative would prefer not to discuss. Because while the international community has been celebrating the lifting of sanctions and the routing of Iraqi crude through Baniyas, Israel has been executing what critics across Turkey, the Arab world, and the United Nations, as well as a growing number of Western analysts, describe as a de facto territorial expansion. Within hours of Assad falling on December 8, 2024, Israeli forces moved beyond the recognized 1974 ceasefire lines and into the UN-patrolled buffer zone. The Israeli government formally declared the 1974 disengagement agreement null and void, citing the collapse of the state that signed it. And what began as a temporary security posture has, by every documented metric, become a permanent infrastructure. Multiple independent sources confirm at least 9 military bases established across southern Syria since December 2024, including positions on the summit of Mount Hermon, a base at the Al Jazeera Dam in Dara province, and a network of installations across Quneitra. In January, Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz stated that the IDF would remain at the summit of Mount Hermon and in the security zone indefinitely. Prime Minister Netanyahu has described a security belt stretching from Mount Hermon to the Yarmouk area as a new security concept. On April 17th, 3 trucks carrying prefabricated rooms and bulldozers were deployed inside the buffer zone, with the Quneitra Media Directorate calling it a new phase of expansion. The following day, 2 tanks and 2 military vehicles entered the position, and took up residence inside the newly installed structures. On April 19th, Israeli patrols established new checkpoints in Quneitra villages, and the parallel civilian track is moving just as fast. On April 16th, the Israeli cabinet approved a 5-year development plan for the Golan Heights, worth roughly $334 million, with the explicit goal of settling 3,000 new Israeli families in the region by 2030 and designating Katzrin as the first formal city in the Golan. Netanyahu framed the plan as a massive development surge to strengthen the north, asserting that the Golan is an uncontested part of Israel's sovereign territory. The United Nations continues to view all settlement activity in the occupied Syrian Golan as illegal under international law, and 134 countries continue to recognize the Golan as Syrian territory. Israel has explicitly demanded the complete demilitarization of Quneitra, Dara, and Suwadya provinces, which is to say, everything south of Damascus. And this brings us directly to the macroeconomic consequence of all of this, because the international response is fracturing in ways that will shape regional capital flows, commodity routing, and the entire balance of power for years to come. U.S. Special Envoy Tom Barak, the man who simultaneously serves as ambassador to Turkey and the architect of American disengagement from Syria, used his appearance at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum on April 17th to publicly break with the Israeli framing. Barak stated that viewing Damascus and Ankara as adversaries rather than partners is a strategic mistake, and that kinetic elimination does not work. Turkey's Foreign Ministry, Hakan Fidan, was sharper, stating directly that Israel is not after its own security, but after more land. Qatar's Foreign Ministry condemned the strikes on Syrian military facilities as a flagrant violation of sovereignty and international law. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Pakistan have moved to form a new diplomatic bloc with Turkey that is openly designed to limit both Israeli and Iranian dominance. And President al-Sharaa has been explicit. No normalization of relations until Israel withdraws to the 1974 lines. He has labeled Israeli sovereignty claims over the Golan Heights invalid and illegal, and he has framed any future security arrangement as a precondition rather than a concession. Markets are already reading the realignment. The Israeli shekel has strengthened almost 5% against the dollar in a single month, sitting near its 52-week strongest level, which institutional desks are interpreting as a reduced regional risk premium being priced in. Brent crude has fallen roughly 15% over the past month from its peak near $113 per barrel, sitting at around $95 today, indicating that the acute Hormuz risk premium has, for now, unwound. And that unwinding is precisely the window in which the Iraq to Banias transit conversation is happening, because if that infrastructure becomes real, the global oil map finally gets a permanent alternative to the Hormuz choke point. So, Syria is in a state of fragile peace. Not ideal, but better than the devastation and heartbreak of the civil war. But the tensions that remain are going to be difficult to resolve. The new Syria has a genuine path to becoming an open regional energy and trade hub, with reconstruction capital, Gulf money, transit revenue, and full international rehabilitation all aligning at the same moment. But that path runs directly through a sectarian fragility at home, a foiled cross-border attack on the southern frontier, and a neighboring power building permanent infrastructure inside Syrian territory, while a sitting US special envoy publicly calls that strategy a mistake. Syria's rebirth and the territorial pressure the country is now under are not separate stories, but part of a bigger shift that could reshape the entire Middle East. So, can the new Syria successfully consolidate as a regional energy and transit hub, or are the challenges it faces just too daunting? Are we watching the emergence of the next Middle East flashpoint? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you want to understand how Turkey's emergence as the dominant regional power is reshaping the entire security map of the Middle East, then check out our video on that right over here. That's all from me today. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. This is Nick, over and out.